Hi everyone, bringing you a specifically requested video today looking at the early Second World War British Army aluminium mess tins, or immediate pre-war in fact. The design, which you can see here, was intended to complement the 1937 pattern Webb equipment, and these came as a replacement for the D-shaped mess tins, which in various forms had been in use with the British Army for 100 odd years and more before the outbreak of the Second World War. But were still in use by some troops equipped with 1908 pattern Webb equipment. So they had a very, very long service life, the D-shaped mess tins. But we have here as I say, the early war aluminium mess tins. These would go out of production during the war due to aluminium shortages. They were never withdrawn, unlike the 1939 dated or the 1939 era aluminium water bottle. These would not be withdrawn, so they do turn up later in the war as well. But as I say, replaced by steel in manufacture. So existing stocks would be issued out, and then later on tinned steel mess tins would be issued, which I've done a separate video on. But we'll get these down on a blanket now and have a look at some of the details, and also compare them to the late war or immediate post-war aluminium mess tins designed as part of the late war jungle equipment. And as with most of that equipment, not actually issued before or not seeing service before the cessation of hostilities. So anyway, we'll have a look at the details of these now. So if we get these two apart here, we can take a look at the markings on the ends of the tins here, which will hopefully come into focus. There we go, we can see both made by CS Limited, 1939. You can see the manner of mounting the handles here with the 3 rivets on the bracket, rather like a hinge. And obviously the handles hinge back. The handles are made of steel. You can see in there, that's the smaller of the 2 mess tins. And the larger example here, which is quite heavily pitted, it's quite worn as you can see. The handle's been re-riveted on, it's a little bit loose there, as you can possibly see. But it is what it is. These, as I say, were introduced to complement the 1937 pattern Webb equipment because they fit neatly into the haversack rather than being carried outside it in a cover, or in the pack, which obviously the D-shaped mess tins that have been used for a very long time prior to this, by this point, were often having to be carried on the outside of the pack or the haversack of the 1908 pattern Webb equipment, which was of course still in use at the start of the war, due to the pack and the haversack being filled with other contents. So the new haversack, the 1937 pattern, obviously is designed to keep these inside it, tucked away from damage and so forth. And they're good for storing things in within. If you've watched the video on the haversack contents, you'll see that they can be used almost as a set of drawers inside. You can put rations inside them and so forth, as would be developed later in the war with the mess tin ration, the 48-hour ration. And they're a very good design, aluminium being the preference, but of course early in the war aluminium became a scarce material, and the steel mess tins would be introduced to supplement these. Unlike the aluminium water bottle, these were never withdrawn, so you do see them in use late in the war. Say by contrast, the early war 1939 dated, tend to be 1939 dated aluminium water bottles were withdrawn from service, but these carried on. These continued to be issued until stocks were used up, it seems, and then you do see them later in the war still being used. One thing that was requested specifically was to compare the early war aluminium mess tins to those which were introduced as part of the late war jungle equipment, and as such I'll just move the little mess tin out of the way for the minute and move the large mess tin round and bring in the large mess tin from the late war jungle set of equipment. Obviously not issued before it wasn't issued to troops who actually saw service before the end of hostilities. It was intended for the continuing use, intended for use during the continuing war against Japan, which obviously didn't transpire because of the way the war developed. But they reintroduced aluminium mess tins, very late war, tropical issue only at that time, and then post-war they were made available to the rest of the army. They were made general issue, and obviously still, I believe, still manufactured today, or at least until very recently. This is the pattern of mess tin that was in use. But you can see it does differ from the early war aluminium mess tin quite markedly in its shape. The corners are much more rounded. The early war aluminium mess tin has a much more square. They are still slightly rounded, but a much more square aspect to the corners. I believe this change was partly due to, obviously it's actually difficult to get the point of a spoon into the corners and dig all the food out. That's possibly a reason for it, but just a change to the shape there. The depth and everything is roughly the same. As I say, the volume is roughly the same, but that's a major visual difference. Another difference, of course, is if we spin these around here, the way that the fold the handles in, to make it a bit easier, the way that the handles are attached, and you can see that they're the 4 rivet versus the 3 rivet design. The two mess tins there. Obviously this method a little bit more secure, but still the same style of folding mess tin, folding handles that fold out like that. So yeah, that's the difference between the early war and the late war aluminium mess tins. I say late war, of course, as already said, not actually. They didn't see service until post-war. So there we have a run through of the early Second World War or immediate pre-war British aluminium mess tins. Obviously, and seen the difference there between those that were designed as part of the late war jungle equipment for the continuing war in the Far East. And obviously those would then set the pattern for the aluminium mess tins in use right the way through the Cold War. So somewhat different from these, but these were the ones that set the pattern. Obviously a move towards aluminium in both these and the water bottle, the early war aluminium water bottle, but paid to by the exigencies of war. You know, it's just one of those things. Definitely a better material to make these from than tinned steel, which is what obviously they ended up being made of. But you have to work with what you've got, and though these were a superior design, the tinned steel were obviously not drawing on vital war materials in terms of manufacturing them. So there it is. As I say, still seen later in the war as well. Fusilier Payne in 1944 in Normandy has a set of these in his haversack. Obviously very clear to see in the haversack layout. So not something that you necessarily need to ditch if you're doing a later war kit layout or something like that. But if you can find a set of these, they're a very good thing to have, because provided they're clean enough, you can eat from them. Certainly the small mess tin in this set I'd be happy to eat from. Perhaps not the other, because it's quite badly pitted and would be difficult to clean. But an interesting bit of early war kit, and an interesting part of the development of British equipment that was going on at the start of or just prior to the Second World War, with Britain rearming and everything. New web equipment, new mess tins, etc. So I do hope you found that interesting. As I say, it was specifically requested, so I thought I'd do a brief video looking at that, specifically the difference between the two types of aluminium mess tins. If you like the content, if you like my videos, and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, more details of British militaria and so forth, then please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you're newly subscribing or already subscribed, make sure you've hit the notification button down the bottom. Obviously notifies you when I upload future videos. I also have a Facebook and an Instagram page where I tend to post up photographs of the collection, different mannequins and things, reenactment events and so forth that don't necessarily slot into YouTube videos. So it's a good place to keep up with other things that are going on. Also a good place to send me messages as well, because Facebook's Messenger is better than YouTube's. So yeah, that's basically everything I wanted to cover in this video, I think. I hope you've found that interesting, as I always say. And until next time, bye for now.